Welcome, everybody. This is the Soul Path Wisdom community class. It's Friday, April 10th, and today we're going to talk about Saturn, Capricorn, and the 10th house. And the moon is in Capricorn today, and that was what gave me the idea to talk about it. Also, what gave me the idea to talk about it is the fact that I see quite often, especially in cookbook kind of astrology books, that they like to say, uh, if your planet is in Capricorn or in the 10th house or it's Saturn, like the three aspects in a chart that are connected in a certain way. If this is true, Saturn, Capricorn, or 10th house, then this is the interpretation. And especially in some of the evolutionary astrology circles, this is considered an appropriate way to go because they share an archetype. So an archetype is kind of a pattern that goes across language, across the world. And if people think of Saturn, Capricorn, 10th house as an archetype, which has certainly a level of truth, the challenge in my mind is that the nuance of the astrology interpretation is lost because to me, it's not exactly the same what Saturn is doing versus what a planet in Capricorn is doing versus what's happening in your 10th house. So today we're going to break apart the astrological language, and this will apply to any other archetypal energy. So the same thing can be true for the moon in Cancer and the fourth house, or Mars and Aries and the first house. Okay, so on we go, breaking it down. You know, I love Saturn. I've done a lot of talks on loving Saturn, connecting to Saturn, working with Saturn in a positive way. And maybe because Saturn rules my North Node, that is why I've become such a student of it and realizing that there is a way that we can co-creatively embody Saturn and work with it in a conscious way and have quite wonderful outcomes. So when people lead with Saturn and say, oh, Saturn is about blockages and stoppages and the karma of things not working, not getting what you want, I feel like they're missing the overarching goal of Saturn and getting stuck kind of in the middle or the lower aspect of it. So let's start with defining Saturn as the part of you, as every planet represents a subpersonality, a part of you. Saturn represents a part of you that seeks mastery, accomplishment, and success. That is Saturn's goal. Clear and simple. I like to think of it also as above, so below, that there's something about Saturn that is an aspect of who we are on a soul level, who we are as spirit, what our soul's purpose is, and how we're wishing to embody it in the physical terrain of Earth, where we manifest things in a solid way. I made this slide a long time ago about Saturn's co-creative process, just to kind of, give you a sense of how it might work, and that Saturn can indicate kind of a process of steps where there's this goal of mastery, and many of us will have several different goals of mastery, but we're going to think a lot today about our Saturn in our natal chart and what that says about the goal of mastery. And there is this karmic piece of Saturn. I mean, obviously, the whole chart is karmic, but as a planet, Saturn is one of the ones that seems to hold a greater imperative, that there's something that we've brought into this life that we have tried to do before and we haven't accomplished. I think that's what brings in with us the negative feelings about Saturn, where we think, oh, this is too hard, I can't do it. And yet we are drawn through repetition and hard work to come to a perfect expression of that Saturn in the sign it's in and in the house that it's in. So there's this mandate within Saturn to accomplish a karmic soul path process. And it may start with envisioning the goals at the bottom of the step. Like, well, what does this Saturn mean? What am I trying to do? We can consider the past. How has this worked out before? Where have we felt stuck and challenged by this mandate? Then we start doing the hard work. And there's a lot about Saturn that encourages us to do things on our own, sort of building that strong sense of self energy. So we do the hard work by ourselves and we feel kind of maybe alone and isolated with it. As we mature, we can start to delegate because we realize if something is a big enough project, we're building legacy, that delegating to others is going to be a helpful process. We simply can't do it all ourselves. As we're doing this, we start to develop more maturity, and maturity is a key aspect of Saturn's work. We also develop integrity if we're doing it right. And if we're not, because Saturn is so engaged in karma, if we don't express integrity while we're doing our Saturn work, we will get slapped by the universe, usually. Sometimes we don't see, sometimes we look at people out in the world and think, oh, they're not getting their karmic slap. But we have to take the long-term view, and maybe sometimes things take a little bit longer. So that brings us to patience. We develop patience, follow through, and more patience. And ultimately, we accomplish. And when we get to the point where we could say, I've now accomplished my Saturn mandate, we will often go back down to the bottom of the steps again and elevate it and think, okay, I've accomplished it to this level, but now how could I take it to another level, a greater level of professionalism, a greater level of accomplishment, a bigger footprint with it, more integrity. So when we're thinking about Saturn at all and where it's transiting, what's going on in the sky with it at this moment, and we know that it's in Aries, it's in a new sign, that it joined with Neptune, and together they are suggesting a mandate for us all to create something new that's steeped in our soul-centered values. When we think about that and where it is and where it's going to be for the next couple of years in Aries, we go back to the natal mandate and we go back to where is Saturn in the natal chart? What does that say about what we're here to do on this Saturn level? Now, one of the ways to think about any planet is to think about the questions it asks of us and start to answer those questions. So key Saturn questions include, what are my true deep soul-centered goals? What do I need to let go of so I can focus on the real work? And this is a really important one because I don't really see it in the books very often, but I see it with every single person I work with, is that at the beginning of a Saturn process, there is a challenging period where we're trying to figure out what our goals are. And that usually means that there's something that we have already structured, something we already built in a Saturnian way that isn't working. And so that initial question tends to feel like, I don't like what I'm doing. I'm exhausted by what I'm doing. I work all the time. I'm not getting my true needs met. I don't have balance. And so we have to figure out what we're going to let go of. And that's usually where people get stuck because they usually feel like they're afraid to let go of what's not working anymore. They're afraid that they're not going to be able to accomplish the long-term goal. And so there's this fear of making a mistake, or sometimes there's what seems like reality circumstances that say, I can't do it. So for instance, you might want to let go of your career or job, but you feel like you won't have enough money otherwise, that what you really want to do isn't going to pay. And so you kind of know what you want to do, but it seems like you can't do it. That is totally Saturn. When somebody's talking in that way about their life choice, you just know from the beginning that it relates to where Saturn is in their natal chart and where it's transiting, and there is a struggle between the true long-term goals and what seems like the reality of current situations. Saturn also asks us, where do I need to grow up? Sometimes if we're not Saturnian enough, we're immature. Uh, and that can take us to the lack of discipline and the lack of commitment and how that's sabotaging true goals. So you can have this great goal that you have based on Saturn, but you're simply not working hard enough. You're not organizing your time schedule. You keep saying, I want to do it, but you don't really do it. On the other hand, you can get stuck in excessive duty, karma, responsibility. So here you see someone endlessly taking care of people who themselves are being immature and not evoking their own Saturn. And sometimes that duty and responsibility is, I mean, it's real. It's a karmic obligation we have. Maybe like to take care of parents in their last years. We don't really see another way around it. But sometimes we're taking care of people that actually could take care of themselves. Another question to ask Saturn is, how can I see this as a test to live up to? So, looking at Saturn as a test and what it would take to pass that test, what it would take to pass that test with distinction, this is something that we can look at. And with Saturn as the archetype, it represents father, authorities, the patriarchal system, those in power. So when we are working with Saturn, we want to look at how we were affected by the patriarchy, by those in power. And we're looking at the way we have been disempowered and the way it's time to come and take our power back and to be the authoritarian in our own life. Now, that's the planet, right? Saturn, the planet, has a mandate to accomplish a major karmic goal. Now, when we look at the sign of Capricorn, we see that it directs a planet to accomplish their goals in ways, qualities, adverbs, adverbial clauses. Capricorn tells a planet to do something in a way that is achieving and striving and success driven and hardworking, and that can lead to the activity of that planet feeling discouraged, blocked, stuck, depressed, or at the worst, even failing. So if we come back for a moment to the planet Saturn, it can be in any sign. So it is always about creating mastery, success, and accomplishment. But if it's in a sign other than Capricorn, its own related sign, it has to accomplish using the qualities of the sign that it's in. So if Saturn is in Pisces, it has to accomplish in a way that's mystical, creative, intuitive, compassionate. If Saturn is in Aries, challenging, because naturally the sign of Capricorn, Saturn's sign, is square to Aries. So we just know there's a hidden tension there. But Saturn will accomplish this mastery, this legacy, this long-term plan in a way, Aries, that is fast, bold, courageous, energetic, independent. Oh, there's a little crossover here. Saturn likes to do things on its own because it knows it's going to do an excellent job and it's going to accomplish masterfully. Aries just naturally feels alone, naturally feels like I'm running through the fields alive, brave, and free. And I'm doing things in my own way, and that makes me happy. So, Saturn in Capricorn, which it's in since last spring, danced in a little bit, all the way now to the early part of 2028. This is what we're dealing with in our natal charts. One more example, I'll think of uh, Saturn in Libra. So Saturn accomplishing slow, steady goals, legacy in a Libran way, in a way of harmony, balance, mediation, in a way that even though as Capricorn, I'm sorry, as Saturn, I am feeling like I'm in this alone and I have my goals and my mandate. In Libra, I must also account for others. I must be collaborative, mediating, fair and balanced, right? So now, sort of switching from all of that, now we're thinking, okay, the sign of Capricorn, any planet can be in Capricorn. So now we take a planet, let's say Mars, because we just talked about Saturn uh, in Aries. Now let's talk about Mars in Capricorn. So Mars as a planet, it represents the part of us that expresses will, desire, and action. It's the part of us that initiates and launches things and goes for it in a kind of an instinctual, gut level way. So if we take that fast moving planet, that intense planet that's instinctual, and we put it in the sign of Capricorn, now it has to slow down. It has to go for what it wants, express will and desire, but in a way that is goal oriented, a little slower, is thinking about what the long term plans are, is operating in a way of vision and considering who to delegate to and not necessarily doing everything alone. We can take another planet, Moon, which is very different than Saturn. Moon representing the part of us that seeks security, nurturing, safety, and put it in the sign of Capricorn. And then that planet will nurture in a way that is grounded, in a way that is building something, in a way that is attuned to this longer term plan of success. So if we think about the moon as mother, a mother who is showing their nurturing and their unconditional love for their children and family will do so by working really hard to make a living, will make sure that the children are ready for the world, that they get a good education, that they can have a career that's good, that basically nurtures in a way that creates long-term success in the world, which may be wonderful for some children, but for other children, that may feel like kind of cold-hearted. A Cancerian or a Pisces kind of a child wants somebody to hug and snuggle and someone who knows them on a soul level. And in that way, the Moon and Capricorn person who's showing their love in their best way would seem kind of cold, rigid, boundaried. It's all about the end goal. It's not about how you feel right now. Now, the third aspect to think about is houses. And just a quick review, houses are the environment of the psyche and the material world that is manifested out of what the psyche believes about things coming into this world. And so the houses are where the planets operate. It's like the terrain. And each house is ruled by the sign on its cusp. And here we see the first house, which starts at technically 9 o'clock on a clock. And so up here, we're going to be talking about the 10th house, which is the career house. This is the domain of your career, your public reputation, your ambition, uh, authority, how you deal with authority, if you are an authority, your legacy, the father or the disciplinarian in the family, the one who gets you ready for the world. Then, as you're older, your bosses or your own leadership style are all shown by the quality of the 10th house, the sign that rules it, which is on what's called the midheaven. That's the cusp of the 10th house. It's an important angle. And then if there's planets in that 10th house, they are operating in that domain. So the 10th house will, in many ways be connected to Capricorn and Saturn because this is ultimately the goal of our hard work and everything we do in life. It's going to naturally lead to a reputation, to maybe a career, to us being an authority in some area. But it's really not the same as Capricorn or Saturn at all. And I like to say that the 10th house shows how the soul shows up in the world. I feel like the soul's desire to accomplish something that in the way that the whole chart is karmic, it culminates in the 10th house. So by the time you get to the end of your life, when people say, oh, that person was the CEO of this major corporation, that's what they accomplished, or that person was like the best mother anybody ever knew. That person was, so caring and loving and took care of everybody in the neighborhood. That person was really creative. Like, they were able to sew and knit and made little gifts for people, always a caring friend. Like, 10th house, we think so quickly of career, but career is not the most important thing for everybody. So for our astrological sentences, we can say for the house that's ruled by Capricorn, in this area of my life, what the house is, my evolutionary goal is to accomplish as legacy the themes of this house as I build self-respect, self-discipline, and excellence. And for every planet that we have in Capricorn, we can say the part of me that has these planetary goals, right? So the planet meets its needs in a way that is success driven, steeped in excellence, and takes the long term view. It does this in the house area. So when we're going through, because of course we're going to go through some charts of some people who are here today in person, and we will look at your natal Saturn, and then the house that's ruled by Capricorn, and any planets you have in Capricorn, and just think about this in kind of a global perspective, but with all of this nuance. And it will be interesting to hear some of you, just reflect on how you experience Saturn and Capricorn and the 10th house. Now, if it's not going well, if your relationship with Saturn and Capricorn not going well, you are going to feel, and the house too, of course, you're going to feel overworked, rigid, depressed, discouraged, alone, grieving and guilty, waiting for the shoe to drop. So I don't even have to look at someone's chart, but I can tell when a Saturn transit or a Saturn fundamental chart issue is the current challenge by these kind of words when the person expresses why they're here. They're overwhelmed, they're overworked, things are not going well. Maybe things are going okay, but they feel like it could change any minute. This tells us to look at all of the Saturn, Capricorn, and 10th house issues. I have one famous chart here to look at. I'll tell you, I have 30,000 charts in my AstroGold software. So my first thought was, let me look at some charts of people in this client list. This includes clients and famous charts that I have. Um, so I did a search for people who would have the Sun, Moon, Mercury, and Venus all in Capricorn. And given that Mercury and Venus can't be too far away from the sun astronomically, I thought there should be a fair number of people who could have that. And I could just get a sense of some of these super Capricorns I've known over time. There were only like 30 charts that came up out of my 30,000 and that had the four. And the thing that I noticed about them is that several of them were the charts of mothers of people that were my clients, where the mothers were very difficult mothers, very harsh, very cruel, even. So that was kind of an interesting thing to see. It was like too much Capricorn on that personal level, uh, not handled well, not handled in a healed way. I'm not going to say all Capricorns are, cruel parents, but if that person has been deprived of love and neglected, which can be a Capricorn feature in childhood, if that person was deprived themselves, then they're going to carry that out into the next generation. But I did know from previous work that Brad Pitt was a super Capricorn. And you can see here that he has the South Node in Capricorn, which to me that is more significant. That's more Capricorn than even the Sun. And then he has Mars, the planet of action, Mercury, the planet of communication, the mind, Moon for nurturing and unconditional love, and Venus for relationship. And they are in the first house of self, but you can see this is 5 degrees away from the cusp line. So we're going to consider, in my mind, that some of this Capricorn energy shows up in his first house, his personal self, but a lot of it shows up in the second house of skills, money, resources, self-worth. The South Node, as we know, represents you've been lifetimes a leader, Capricornian, in charge of things. But the karmic imprint is often that things went terribly wrong, and one is left with a fair amount of fear and guilt and grief for circumstances that they often had no control over. I often use the example that you're a general in the army and you're leading troops across the tundra and they're all dying and you're having to be a leader and encourage them to keep going when you yourself know that it's going to fail, the mission's going to fail. So you end up dying with that memory of endless duty and responsibility, deprivation, being in charge of a failing project, and you come in with all of the leadership abilities to accomplish, but there's that underlying feeling that things may go wrong and you may not have enough authority to actually make the changes you would like to make. So this is very core to him, that whole wiring that we can think about as a past life story, but we can just think about as the natural indicator of working hard to build success and to be a natural leader in some ways. And then we put Mars right next to it, and Mars being action, will, and desire in a way, like we said, in a way that is grounded, stabilizing, attuned to achieving a karmic mandate, attuned to working on an independent level to build something. Mercury, the mind, communication, the way one thinks, in the sign of Capricorn, can certainly lead the mind to be strategic and to work toward building something, but can also lead toward the dark side of Capricorn, the depression, the feeling of being blocked, the feeling of isolation. I'm in this all by myself, even if I have love and partners. And we see both the moon and Venus, two aspects of relationship, both in Capricorn. The moon being more about unconditional love, nurturing and security, the way you nurture people you love. So this is the classic of the person says, well, of course I love you. I'm working 80 hours a week and I built you an amazing house. That's moon in Capricorn. Person who wants more emotional, snuggly, close and connected, watery energy doesn't, may appreciate having the house, but doesn't appreciate the long hours apart or the feeling that you don't even know what my real needs are. You don't know what I'm going through. You're not asking me questions about myself. You're just always focused on your work. And Venus in Capricorn, more around general relationship issues, the way one relates, draws people to them, stabilizes the relationship, and the way one draws resources to them stabilizes that. Well, he's going to be probably very good at that, very good at, uh, building something to last, but maybe kind of clueless about what is going on deeper emotional levels. Now, in order to sort of understand more about these planets in Capricorn, we want to go to Saturn, the planet that rules Capricorn. So here's Saturn, that he could say, I am here to create mastery, accomplishment, and success in a way that is Aquarian, in a way that is unique, original, outside the box, maybe sometimes detaching from my own needs, to detaching from anything emotional because I'm going to be, uh, really connected on a more high mental level. I might change, I might be going in one direction, I might change unexpectedly because it's very important that as I'm building success and mastery, that I am authentic. And ultimately, if this is taken to a much higher level, Saturn in Aquarius wants to build success in a way of enlightenment and freedom. So there's quite a spiritual quality there. The position of the Saturn is right here on the third house cusp, which has to do with communication, siblings, day-to-day life. But what we really want to see is what's going on in his 10th house. And the 10th house up here is ruled by Virgo. So that is very different in the way of it's still Earth, but it's much more about details, service, humility. Uh, really, there's a lot of extra hard work. There's a blending here because of the inner critic energy, Saturn and Capricorn and the sign of Virgo all tend toward a pretty strong inner critic. So 10th house for him is, connected to doing the work, doing the accomplishment of work, and maybe ultimately being known for some level of service. Uh, the house that's ruled by Capricorn, however, is the second house where we've got this huge stellium of planets. And so this says that the whole area of money, resources, self-worth, his skills, all is guided by the Capricorn desire to work hard, to be successful, to be organized, to keep going and going until the accomplishment is created. Now, one of the things that maybe many of you know about, he was divorced about 10 years ago, and his alcohol use was a big part of what led to that divorce. And he apparently has been clean and sober and actively involved in AA since then. So I was reading a little bit about his process and where he is. And if you know anything about 12-step programs, one of the things about it is that it emphasizes a lot handling things in an integral way, communicating, taking care of business, getting up in the morning and making your bed, reading your mail, dealing with things that need to be dealt with, and ultimately also being of service. So there's clearly a way that the process he went through, the pain of losing his marriage, and for a while, at least, a lot of the access to his children, which was really important to him, has caused him to do a big turnaround and to develop this greater level of mastery, accomplishment, and maturity that this chart calls for. And the other thing that I would say about it is that his soul level goal with the North Node in Cancer is to develop unconditional love, nurturing, care in the context of a partnership, in the context of intimate bonding, and it's ruled by Moon in Capricorn. So, in order to get there, in order to develop that Cancerian energy, he has to kind of come back to what he knows at his core about being responsible, about being a stand-up person, living up to his commitments and his obligations. So I think, we could go on and on about him, but I think that's enough to kind of clarify the direction we're going. And let's see, yes, because now what we're going to contemplate is a couple of charts. See, yeah, we still have enough time to do a few. Uh, your natal Saturn, where is it? Planets you have in Capricorn, and any houses that you have ruled by Capricorn. And yeah, we'll take a little look at your 10th house too, and just see if it's at all connected. Does it seem like it's well connected to the Capricorn energy in your chart? And as we come into looking at these charts, you know that these videos go up on YouTube. I would like the first person who puts their hand up to have me look at their chart be somebody who doesn't mind if your chart goes up on YouTube. And Sandra Jean, I see I already put your chart up first because I figured you would be quick to say this. So thank you for validating my intuition. Just a quick reminder that Intuitive Skills for Astrologers starts April 25th. That's coming up. And the Astro Cycles forecasting class is now June 13th. Consulting skills, training in Chicago, training by Zoom, also coming up soon. And of course, the NORWAC and the UAC conferences. We've got a lot going on in this year. And that's the end of this. And we'll come now into charts. Okay, so we will start with Sandra's chart. And first, we'll go to Saturn. So you actually have Saturn in Capricorn. So Saturn, the part of you that seeks mastery and accomplishment and success, does so in a way that is grounded, mature, linear, wanting to be excellent, wanting to have integrity, possibly sometimes getting discouraged and depressed about how things are going. Okay. And it is located in the 12th house of spirituality. This says that ideally you apply your Saturn principles in a way of spirituality, retreat around nature. If you don't, or early in the life where there's not a lot of choice, this Saturn can show up as karmic experiences that are very difficult to handle. Challenges with people in authority, for instance, a father. challenge sort of fears about people in authority, because this Saturn, Jupiter together can indicate karmic experiences of terrible loss brought upon by patriarchal figures in charge and based on their religious beliefs that don't necessarily hold empathy. So there's a process here with this Saturn to go from challenging experiences where you probably felt like you were really alone, and and then ultimately to develop your own maturity and success. Uh, but in this area, by experiencing spiritual things. Now, there's the learning of spirituality, which is ninth house. And that's a pretty important area for you too, because it's got Neptune, which is the ruling planet of all your Pisces, and it's in Scorpio, so that connects to Pluto and depth. I can just imagine that there have been various religious, philosophical, or belief things that you have learned over this lifetime. But ultimately, to have Saturn in the 12th house says that you integrate it, you bring it to mastery and success by yourself through your own felt experiences, by your meditations, by watching the sunset, by looking at the waves. And to have the 12th house ruled by Capricorn adds a fine point to that, that it is so important for you to give yourself time in this lifetime to come to a sense of accomplishment and success of your own unique spiritual beliefs. You can study, you can learn through partners, you can learn through teachers, but ultimately it's how you apply the spiritual principles yourself by giving yourself the solitude. That's a really good Saturn word. Giving yourself the solitude that you need, the retreat, the nature, and just time to process. On a practical way, what I would suggest is that you consider journaling, every single day. If you don't already, you probably do. Um, Make sense, Sandra?
Yes, perfectly. I've tried so many different religions and I just always come back to just me and God because that just makes the most sense. And I feel accomplished in so many ways, but it's through learning to love myself. It's not through material things. And it is nature that I turn to, the waves, like you said, the ocean. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. I appreciate you, Kay.
Oh, thank you, Sandra. Um, I will just say one more thing, which is 10th house. So the
Okay.
10th house in your chart is ruled by Scorpio, the very last degree. So you may be known for challenging experiences you've had in this life that you have transformed into power and integrity.
Yes.
And the Pluto ruling it, Mars in Cancer as the original ruler of that scorpionic energy, and it's in the house of children. Pluto's in the house of other people, partners. To me, this indicates, basically challenging relationship issues that lead to a deep level of your empowerment. Pluto is the other major aspect in my mind of our karmic mandate for this life, as well, of course, as the lunar nodes. That's base to me. But lunar nodes, Pluto and Saturn, are so much the indicators of the deep karmic missions that we have. And this too suggests that, through experiences that you go through and the transformation of those experiences, you come deeply into a kind of quiet power that shows up in the world.
Mm.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. I love it.
Okay, so that's the end of our our YouTube presentation, and let me look at a couple of other charts.